to figure out why this automatically shifts to the next screen. I hope it stops. But anyway, this is a little bit about me. I am a refugee from Indiana University. My dad was on the faculty, and so it made sense to go there. And really thought I got a good education. So, and after that, I joined, I got an MBA from there, well, a BS and an MBA. And then I joined General Motors Corporation back when it was General Motors, not General Motors. And I did that on purpose. I wanted to understand big companies and best practices and things like that. And I was there for about 5 years, and then my gut and my brain told me it was time to get the hell out, and so I did. So I left GM to start a software company based on a lot of what I'd learned at GM at the age of 29. And the one thing I've always done is I've hired people better than me. That's not hard to do, but I've hired people better than me. So once I left GM, started a company with a couple other people, and we had an unfair advantage that we mercilessly pursued. We were financed by banks, angel investors, and venture capital firms, grew to about $76 million in revenues with 350 employees and an international marketing footprint. That was a huge amount of fun. Just I'd been, out of the country a few times, but to me it was a great eye-opener and I loved it. We were eventually purchased by an international financial powerhouse, Swiss reinsurance company, which is the second largest reinsurance company in the world. And so for a period of 2 years, I worked for a company headquartered in Zurich, and I must tell you, it was a very interesting experience. They had purchased, well, of course you know that, well, you probably know they're in the reinsurance business, and then they do sell direct insurance policies, and they had a plan for the company to acquire companies that were in the insurance business related, and anything to do with the insurance business qualified them. So they ended up buying our company, which was a software company that provided software to the insurance industry. They had a company that changed windshields in cars, just from Oslo, Norway. So just all over the world, they had this very, very eclectic collection of companies that basically didn't duplicate what each other did. So when you got together, there wasn't a lot to talk about. But anyway, their attitude through the whole thing was, we know what we're doing, we're Swiss, we plan things very carefully, and ultimately it turned out they had no idea what they were doing, and finally, in a fit of pique, I'd already left the company by then, in a fit of pique, the management board fired the whole management team that had put this grand plan together. So be careful when people tell you they know what they're doing. So after 2 years, I moved on and I founded some other businesses. One of the negatives of having your first go out of the box be positive is you tend to think you're a lot smarter than you really are. And I learned that. I mean, I knew I wasn't that smart, but it would have been better if I'd had a few kicks in the face before than after that experience. So anyway, about 12 years ago, by then, I'd been a ways away from the sale of my business, and I had a consultancy, Wingspan Thinking, which I still have. I became a SCORE mentor. SCORE is financed by the Small Business Administration, and they give away advice. And I thought it'd be a good place to do networking, and it was if you wanted to give away advice. And then at that same period, back in 2007, I began teaching for the first time ever in Purdue's Entrepreneurship and Innovation program. And I got this email from the director of our area, who still is, and it said, I came across your resume and you have some interesting experience, and I thought you might be interested in learning about our program. And so I read up on it a little bit, and I thought, boy, this sounds like a really super program. So I came up here and sat down with her and a couple other people, and I was really enchanted by the whole thing. And so I signed on, and I've been here ever since. And I now teach 3 Power Hour classes, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I commute from the northern edge of Indianapolis, and which works out just fine, gives me time to think and be by myself. But I've really enjoyed it. I think Purdue's a wonderful institution, and have always been a big fan of Mitch Daniels, and certainly have been impressed by how innovative he is. So we'll move on to, well, this is the advertisement about our program, one of the largest of its kind in the U.S. We have over 1,800 students a year enrolled. We're located in Burton Morgan Center since 2005, which is when it opened. We are administered through the provost's office. When Jischke was the president, he was the one that was instrumental in setting this up. And he was very outspoken. He did not want tenured professors with no experience talking to entrepreneurial students with no experience. And he wanted people who'd been entrepreneurs. And they've stuck to that. And our students seem to really appreciate that, because the stuff that interests them isn't the kind of facts you can find out anywhere. It's how you relate to people and how you deal with the curveballs that you get thrown. So anyway, that's a little bit about our program. Any questions? Please.
What was the unfair advantage?
Thank you. Thank you. In my first class, which is a week ago, the lady who was doing the proctoring, she asked it. So I appreciate you asking it. The unfair advantage was this. At General Motors, I was in the IT department, and this was back when companies trained their own people. The universities weren't doing it yet. And so going to General Motors was a dual-edged sword for me, because I wanted to learn about big companies, and that's where I got my training. So I had on-the-job training, which was really magnificent, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. During that 5-year stint, about 2.5 years into it, General Motors replaced their development platform, their software development platform, with a very current state-of-the-art one that did an awful lot more for you. And in fact, some of the programmers at the company I worked, Allison, were offended that they couldn't get to keep doing this. A machine could do it better than they could. Well, frankly, it could. It could do it better than they could. So anyway, so I got a first-hand taste of that, and with my MBA experience, I realized that, hey, this is dollars and cents. This is a tremendous boon to efficiency. And so I began thinking, when I get really tired of this place, General Motors, it'd be nice to look for an industry that is using decades-old software like GM was, and show them a new platform and how they can get things done faster, cheaper, better. And so that's what we did, and we kind of kept sort of nosing around until we found the right opportunities. And so the unfair advantage was that we were able to very quickly put on the table a software product written in a third level language, which most products were not at the time, which meant we could be on the air much, much faster than any of the alternatives. And I'll divert to one personal story there. I used to like to wax rhapsodic about the money our system could save, because we researched that and we felt we could say we could do that. And so one day a CEO of a company pulled me aside and said, "You know, son," I don't get called that very often, "we don't really care about saving money." He said, "At 10 o'clock every morning, a dump truck backs up to our front door and dumps a whole ton of money in our lobby. And so we spend the rest of the day getting rid of that money. So we're not really bugged on saving money. The reason we wanted your product is you'll have us on the street quicker so we can make even more of that money." And that was a big eye-opener to me, that sometimes it pays to keep your mouth shut and your ears open. So from then on, that's what I talked about. So, and it worked. I mean, it was a very effective thing to say. Anything more? Okay, well, we're talking about goodbye waterfalls. And that is kind of a play on words with waterfall development. And we cut our teeth on a fellow by the name of Steve Blank, who was a serial entrepreneur. He made a lot of money. He then became an investor, and then he became an educator, and he fell in love with being an educator. He's on the faculty of Stanford and MIT and just all over the place, Harvard. So anyway, he said from day one, entrepreneurs must investigate, experiment, test, and iterate as they develop an idea, not wait until the idea is perfect and then do all this until it's perfect and this until it's perfect. We'll see that in a minute. And he also said that a startup is not a smaller version of a big company. Its purpose is to search for a sustainable business idea and keep pivoting, meaning you kind of keep one foot where it was, and then you begin making changes. Could knock yourself over. You begin making changes as you learn more, until you find an idea that has sustainability. And his main advice was, you'll learn nothing in your own building. Get out of the building. Go talk to people. You can't start too early. And so that's kind of what I found in my own experiences. So this is Steve Blank, and this is a depiction of a waterfall design. And Blank's comment would be, wait, the first customer input is months after starting. So you've been through all these steps, and then you start selling, and that's when you find out, did you get it right? That is a very expensive bet, that you did get it right in all that period, because the team has been negotiating with itself for the most part. So 75% of startups fail, and he felt that was a reason, not necessarily the reason. When should you involve customers? When do you think? What would you suggest? When should you bring customers into the conversation? Please. Right at the start. Absolutely. As soon as possible. Because they have all the knowledge. So he wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review called "Why the Lean Startup Changes Everything," and they turned that into a PowerPoint presentation. And you can run through it very quickly, so I'm going to do that. Let me keep an eye on the clock. Okay. Okay, so this is the HBR PowerPoint based on his article for them. So the classic way to start a business, very methodical and very detailed. 75% fail. You can't make good predictions 5 years in advance. And I think his point there was so much of where you need to be evolves over time, and if you don't really start getting that input early, it's going to stack up on you and you're going to probably regret it. Oops, I did the wrong arrow. And everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That was Mike Tyson's contribution to the world. Most product developers don't get customer feedback until it's too late. They begin to try to execute a model when they should be searching for a model. And that's his big differentiator. You're searching for a model until you find it. So the business model canvas that you may have heard about, but that's very big on that, is on one piece of paper the ability to look at all the major areas that a business has to serve. And the beauty of that is that when you begin to make changes, you begin to expand what you're doing. You're going to put, here's how we're going to have additional customer segments. We're going to have additional revenue streams. This is going to remind you, by the way, where are the costs accounted for to support those. So you don't forget stuff like that. So you can see what assumptions that he felt were important. And customer development is listen and learn. And he likes to say you can't listen to customers at your desk. And the minimum viable product, the value of that is a depiction of some kind. It could be wireframes, it could be a PowerPoint, it could be an actual model of something. And he said that allows the team to collect the most information about customers with the least effort, because now they have something they can fix on and they can relate to. So then you see, as opposed to the waterfall that was very delineated, this is a continually getting feedback and not moving on until you were ready and you could see that you were creating customers. And then once you're able to create customers, you're ready to build your company. And so the whole idea of Agile is to iterate very quickly. And this, again, was the traditional product development, long and linear versus short and very quick feedback. The ability to not waste a lot of money finding out that this wasn't going to work anyway. So he gave an example of Blue River Technology, which started out to be a mowing service by a bunch of engineers, and they found nobody was willing to pay what they were looking for. And so then they got the idea, well, we could also pick weeds. You know, they were in California, and California doesn't allow them to spray chemicals. And so they said, we can identify weeds and we can pick them. We can pull them out of there. So then that led to, once they proved that they could do that, people said, you know what else we need? We need a mechanical way to thin lettuce. So as lettuce begins to grow, we need to thin it. And it's, you know, we have a lot of human labor involved in that. And so they were able to modify what they had to do that also. So he was, he was contrasting the traditional ventures, functional departments, hire for experience and ability to execute, measure income, revenue, assets, cash flow. All those things are important. But the lean startups have agile teams. They work in very small time sets. They manage themselves for the most part. They hire for ability to learn, nimbleness, and speed. And they look at things like customer acquisition costs, lifetime customer value, churn, and viralness. So the broader impact is a high startup success rate equals more job growth. And the barriers, cost of getting the first customer, cost of getting the product wrong, the long technology development cycles, and the number of risk takers, the first three pretty much go away through the pivoting and through all that. And the number of risk takers began to diminish because they had all this stuff going for them now. So he felt the macro trends encouraging startups, decentralization of capital. Ruminate, which is a high-tech firm, got its first products back from a contract manufacturer in just 3 weeks from China. So I mean, the idea that, you know, would the turnaround time be tolerable? The answer was yes. So business schools are embracing lean startups. They're all over the universities now. Corporate entrepreneurs are going lean. GE, which we'll be talking about more later, their French door refrigerator went through 10 fast iterations until the national product rollout. So they actually tested it in the field and were able to really perfect it before they'd sold a lot of them. So the new toolkit, traditional, elaborate planning, intuition, upfront design, lean startups, experimentation, customer feedback, many design iterations. So fail fast, keep learning, meet change head on. And that was it. That was the presentation. Okay, so we have done that. Any questions so far? Okay, here's a tale of two companies. One is John Deere, the big agricultural manufacturer, and the other is General Electric, which dates its founding back to Thomas Edison. He was one of the first employees of General Electric, and I mean back in the 1800s. And so GE had become a very, very heavy organization. They had all kinds of reporting techniques that people had to keep reporting where they were. This got wiped out when Jeffrey Immelt, well, we'll get to GE in a minute. Here's about John Deere. What they found was that in developing agile development, they were wasting their time until they began to do the same thing for the management staff. They needed to have everybody on that same wavelength rather than the management staff wanting these huge reports, frequent reports, whatever. And that's where they got to. So anybody know where the term C-suite came from in big companies? I didn't either. I mean, and I found that it stood for the fact that so many of people working in the C-suite were chief executives, chief financial officer, they started with chief. That's where the C came from. And so their point was the C-suite needs to be very, very actively involved. But look at what they achieved. They compressed innovation product cycle times in some cases by more than 75%. When you think of a company the size of John Deere, that is a lot of money and it's a lot of opportunity. That the faster you get out with, your next invention, the quicker you're going to reap the results. So they talked about working for 8 months on a prototype of a new machine form, and their executives said that if everything went perfectly in a traditional process, it would be 1.5 years at best, could be as much as 2 to 3 years, and they did it in 8 months. But then what really excited me was they measure team engagement and team happiness. I mean, they're really asking the question, where's your happiness factor? And this unit shot quickly from the bottom third of the company to the top third, and quality improved. So then they talked about velocity, which is the amount of work accomplished in each sprint. The sprint is the measure of the activity they're doing, and they're very quick. They can be 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever. But it increased on average by more than 200%. So they're saying double. Some teams achieved an increase of more than 400%, and one team 800%. So, again, with an MBA, I'm very interested in the implication of that for a P&L, and it would be awfully strong. Okay, General Electric. 2015, they rebranded themselves as a digital industrial company with a focus on digitally enabled products. Sounds like a lot of words. But part of that transformation involved some new divisions which they staffed with people very unlike most of the people that they had in GE at the time. So they were looking for, thinkers, what have you, rogues. See how we're doing. So the Scrum team, and the Scrum is the group of people doing the work, they ran in 2-week sprints. They conducted stand-up meetings 3 times a week. They tended to be pretty small, like maybe 5 to 8 people, generally. They chart their progress on a board in an open conference room that any employee can go in and look at. GE used to never be that way. They used to be very secretive, and they would never go public with stuff like that. And they collect happiness surveys, root cause analysis, et cetera, trying to send a message that says, we heard you, here's how we will improve things. So it makes the management and the rest of the company feel like they're on the same page. During IMMELT's 16 years as CEO, they did 5 things that were transformative, including organization from top down to agile and decentralized, which was an amazing change for General Electric. It was anything but that. They doubled their investment in R&D, and they created a strong local presence in 180 countries. IMMELT made a very interesting observation. He said, you must be profoundly convinced, as the CEO, you must be profoundly convinced that a company must transform itself, that it's a matter of life or death, because when you start the play, you will get pushback. So, and he was. I mean, he put himself in that position. So, and then Harvard kind of followed up all this with an article on embracing Agile, which really talked about